All right. All right. Have a great show. Going in four, three, two.
Welcome. It's great to have you here with us today on Humanity Evolved, where we focus on how to succeed and thrive in a rapidly changing world. I'm your host, Catherine Calarco, a global leader and board director for AI in healthcare. Our goal is to inspire, empower, and inform you and your community and your family and the rest of the world to help you create a better life. We bring you experienced and trusted experts to talk about what's best with technology and human connection to support your goals. So have your notes ready because today we want you to identify at least one actionable strategy that will take your leadership communications to the next level in the age of AI. So this is a very exciting topic, and I'm really happy to be here today with Dr. Joanna Massey. I mean, she is an amazing communicator and very accomplished, and she has been talking about effective communication in the age of AI. Welcome, Joanna. Thank you for joining us. Can you please
Thank you.
introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And I spent my whole career in communications, 30 years in corporate communications, mostly in the media industry. So big companies, CBS, Viacom, Discovery, Lionsgate, Hasbro, that type of thing, all public companies. And I left that career and now I sit on corporate boards. I'm chairman of the board of a financial services company and I'm lead director of a tech manufacturer. And I love board work. And you mentioned boards too. I love doing it. It's fascinating. But in my spare time, I have gotten a couple of graduate degrees. And one of them, I got the typical MBA in corporate finance, that type of stuff that you would naturally do in business. But one of them is a PhD in psychology. And I use that and the communications background to talk to corporations, to give keynotes at conferences, things like that. I've written a couple of books, but basically helping people communicate better through divisiveness. There's a lot of divisiveness, and I believe that social media has empowered us to speak to each other in a way that we didn't used to. And we have to relearn how to respect the human that's across the table from me or across the Zoom room from me, and let them have a difference of opinion and express my difference of opinion in a way that's constructive and kind and doesn't have to be, battling each other.
Exactly. I mean, we used to argue at the dinner table in our family, and it was just normal in terms of having a conversation about different views, and we were learning things, and then you give each other a hug, and or you go for a walk. So I think what's really interesting about what you're bringing up is that leaders are now being called to articulate what is it to be human, right? And how do we know what is real and what is the truth? And how do we make that evident within our teams and create and operate and connect and lead so that we have that openness, right? So I think it is a different scenario that we're faced with now that we have AI in the world, and we're challenged to what do we do or how do we work this? And yes, of course, there's dozens of centers and organizations that are focused on AI and ethics, governance, and leadership, from the Center for AI Digital Policy. There's the Coalition for Healthcare AI. There's the universities and HBR and firms like McKinsey. So there's a lot of information around there. So what we're going to focus on in this session is how can leaders better understand and manage AI's impact on both relationships and communication. So this is really leveraging your amazing experience and your wealth of knowledge on the role of leaders to create that better communication. So how are we going to operate? Challenges and opportunities to leverage both sides. And then what I'm really looking forward to is the 3 essential steps to enhance and improve communication. This is where you might want to get your pencils out and write down. So we'll get to that and explore it. So to kick us off, the initial question is really, where are you seeing, what ways do you see AI affecting leadership communication? And how does it impact relationships and organizations?
I'm going to take us back pretty far
Oh,
on this
good.
one because people think AI is this recent thing, like, oh my gosh, ChatGPT, it's going to take over my mind, it's going to take over the world, it's going to take over me. That's already happened. And it's
Mm.
been happening for 30 years because what people don't realize is if we go back to when computers first got into the home, and then you add the internet onto that, it first became publicly available. The search engine was born because we needed to search this massive amount of information and bring it down to here. And all search engines use AI. So for 30 years, AI has been manipulating what we see. And if it manipulates what we see, it dictates what we think, right? Because what we see then forms our thought processes. And I know a lot of people who say things like, I look at both sides of an argument, or I read multiple different kinds of media. But if the majority of what's coming into you on your news feed, on your social media feed, on your television set, on your smart TV, right? If the majority of what's coming into you is programmed, it's the algorithm is going for what you like, it's only reinforcing your belief system. And so we've gotten into a place where AI is really taken over how we perceive the world outside of us. And now when you have to add in another layer to this, which is where the psychology comes in rather handy. And it has to do with neuroscience. And I promise this won't be boring. I say that and some people's eyes roll behind, in the back of their head. But essentially, we have what's happening is we've gotten very much like us against them. And the reason it's become that way, in my estimation, is because the AI has siloed us and social media has simultaneously connected us. So we're not alone in the world anymore. So that our belief systems, which we might not have said out loud, no matter what side of the spectrum they were on, now we can, because in social media, on the internet, in the digital world, we can always find somebody who agrees with us. And it has created this, and we're human beings are very tribal. So we surround ourselves with people who are like us. We are biologically programmed to do that. And we naturally push away people who are different from us. Also a biological, save the organism.
Right.
And we have gotten very tribal. And I think that what we're not giving enough credit to is the fact that the fight, flight, or freeze system, which is the survival mechanism that all human beings have. Nothing you can do to not have this thing or to stop it from happening. The fight, flight, or freeze is kicking in way more often than I think we're giving it credit for.
So you think that the like the algorithms that are incorporated into search and to social media have been manipulating our view of the world and leveraging the neuro kind of the amygdala, the primitive brain, our lizard brain, to create these bubbles that almost force the divergence rather than allow us to have the convergence or understanding of each other. Without, it seems like we've been evolved into this. And I think that it's been evident. I mean, you see a lot of movement with kids and mental health and new policies and regulations and the rise of humane technology focus to make us more conscious about what this is happening, and also make the companies more aware of how they're maybe not doing the best thing for ourselves. Is that kind of what you're seeing? And is there either positive or negative examples of that? Because you've talked about the impact of negative. Is there anything where it's positive, where it's actually helping us?
I think there's always, I'm one of those glass half full people.
Yeah.
So I always think there's a silver lining to everything. And not, hopefully not in a Pollyanna-ish way, but
Yeah.
so yes, there are positives to it. I mean, look, when you think about people who either on either side of the political spectrum, either you have people who have views that, I want people to look like me and to have my religion and to think like me. And there used to be a time where it wasn't so acceptable. Like, it was okay, but it wasn't so acceptable. But now you can find tons of people online you know,
Mm,
who you
oh,
feel at home with, who you feel like are part of your tribe. And that's important because, and on the other side of that, think about all the people who are LGBTQ,
right.
who didn't, or who question their gender, which has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
And the reason and people are like, where did this suddenly come from? It didn't suddenly come from anywhere. You're just more aware of it because of social media.
Yeah.
Because now somebody who thinks, wow, I'm really not comfortable in my body, instead of keeping that inside their whole life, they have a whole community to share it with. So
Yeah.
yes, there's absolutely positives about the fact that AI and social media and digital technology can connect us and give us community in a way that it never has. The negative side of that community is that it's causing silos and separation. And we just need to get back to the point where we, you know, and that's what I talk about in those 3 steps that you alluded to that we'll talk about, you know, shortly.
Yeah.
That's when we get back to respecting somebody else's humanness,
Yeah.
allowing them to be the human they are, but then they need to allow you to be the human you are. So,
Yeah, and I think that's really, we see that with the rise of communities for healthcare, you know, customer advocacy groups or patients like me, areas where, you know, you don't feel alone. You have a group that shares a common bond, but there can be a lot of diversity in the way you feel about other things. And so that commonness allows you to connect with people, get information, get help and support. And I think it also drives the, you know, the conscious awareness of allowing people to be different, you know, and understanding what that is. I mean, I think underneath it all, we have this similar values and wants in life, and you know, there's a lot of things we're all looking for. So as leaders, it's almost tapping into the common aspect and allowing understanding of the differences. You know, I may not have, you know, a specific type of cancer, but I can resonate and understand and appreciate their life, you know, and what's going on for them by asking questions or being involved in how it's going for them, so that I can be more of a compassionate leader, and help to support them. You know, in this, we learn a lot about trust and diversity that you touched on earlier. You know, and I know that high performing teams are built on trust. So how can leaders build trust and encourage that diverse intellectual contribution within their teams? What do you see working?
so I think that I actually wrote a book on this called
Oh,
Culture Shock because culture
perfect.
shock is about the 5 generations in the workplace right now. And there is such a disparate view of life. I mean, you take somebody who's in their late 70s, early 80s, who's still in business, still in finance, still in entertainment, still in politics, and you put them in a business situation with someone who's in their early 20s, who's a Gen Zer. That is going to be a very, very different look at life. And what we were seeing, was this, you can't talk to me like that, or why do you think that, or don't behave that way, you know, like shame on you, not good. And what we're coming into now, thankfully, post pandemic, and now that we're all sort of back in workforce, in the workplace rather, is this idea that, okay, hold on, instead of trying to script everybody, make them into robots that say exactly the right thing or don't say exactly the wrong thing, how about opening up to what we're talking about right now, which is people's humanness? The
Mm,
person that you're talking to who's on the other side of that conversation is a human being just like you and me. And that person has had upset and tragedy and pain and fear. And they've had happiness and joy and excitement. We've all had it,
yeah.
right? To remember that that's what's going on with that person, to respect that they had different experiences than me. I've not walked a second in their shoes. And as a result, you know, maybe I can appreciate, I might not agree with you, but I can respect that you have that opinion based on whatever was, you know, however you formed it. And I can be curious about that. Just like you said, ask questions.
Ask questions. Yeah, I think staying open to having a conversation to understand each other. We may not use the same words, but we actually can understand each other through questions and dialogue. So that communication and the words that we express in the time that you take I often have a set of questions when something seems weird or I don't understand it. I'll have a set of questions to explore because I'm naturally curious. And in the same way, I really work hard to create a safe environment for diversity to actually occur. So I hear different views and we collectively try to understand that perspective. And then obviously we need to make a decision and we need to execute on that and we need to make things happen. So, if we kind of remove the barriers, we don't get lost in our over communication, but we can in fact execute with excellence based on understanding. And this is an excellent place to pause because we're going to move right into those 3 steps. So Joanna is going to give us 3 steps after the break. We're going to take just a few minutes. So hang with us, come back and listen in to the 3 steps for how to optimize your communication and create better relationships. This is Catherine Calarco on Humanity Evolved. We'll be right back.
All clear. Great segment. Let me get that saved and we get to go in just a moment.
Thank you. You good? Love to talk about examples too. So some scenarios that you've seen, or
Oh yeah,
or
good idea. Sorry, I didn't bring in any stories.
that's okay. Let's do stories. Maybe we start with that, or do you want to weave the stories into the 3 steps?
Let me weave them into the steps.
Okay. All righty. And if we don't, we'll conclude with that.
All right, ready for your counter for your second segment? All right. Next segment going in 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back. This is Catherine Calarco on Humanity Evolve, and we're with Dr. Joanna Massey talking about communications in the age of AI. So right before the break, we were touching on some of the leadership elements to build trust and allow for diversity of intellect. And I'd just like to move now into the 3 steps. I mean, this is where, get your pens out or type on your laptop to take notes. Joanna, tell us, what are those 3 steps? And can you give us examples or stories of where this has worked? We'd love to hear from that.
Sure. Because I spent my career in communication, I was taught to simplify everything, right? To take complex concepts and bring it down. I also believe in the rule of 3s, which is that human beings remember things in 3s. And so what I did was I created 3 steps that encompass a lot of information, but are easy to remember. So the first step, I call it, honor thyself, right? The second step is honor thy neighbor. And the third step is share your own story. So let me explain that. And it's memorable in that it's obviously harkens back to, things that we've heard as a kid of, religious and biblical. So honor thyself essentially means keep an eye on yourself, keep an eye on your own reactivity. I know when I'm about to go into an amygdala hijack. Okay. It took a lot of study. It took me some time to figure that out. And I learned how to do it by doing mindfulness meditation, which is when you sit there and in silence and you watch your thinking, you observe it, but you don't react to it. So that's how I learned to observe my reactions. But I can tell you that I sit on, like I mentioned, I sit on a couple of boards, and there's one of my boards can get really contentious. And you don't really think of, people in business sitting around a boardroom table screaming at each other. But let me tell you something, we go there. And I try really hard not to be that person. And sometimes it just doesn't work. So I've had to really pay attention to when I'm about to get defensive and get into that fight moment, right? Yeah. And my body sends me signals, and I know what they are. And I know if I feel my heart fluttering, or my skin gets kind of prickly, or my face gets flush, anything that comes out of my mouth at that moment is not going to be good. I know that now. So the first step, honor thyself, means honor the signals your body's giving you and take steps to try to calm it down. Do some deep breathing. I call it, there's this thing called 4 square breathing, which is literally a magical cure for anything, where you breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold that for 4 counts. You're calming down the system, you're busying the mind, and all of a sudden you're not as either, in the fight mode, or in the freeze mode, or in the afraid mode.
Yeah.
So there's that. So honor thyself. Second step, honor thy neighbor. Just a nice way of saying, or a catchy way of saying, remember that you're talking to a human being who can also get into fight, flight, or freeze. So you want to speak to them in ways that aren't going to trigger them. And trigger is a very overused word right now, I have to say. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it really explains the situation well, which is that if I say to somebody, why'd you do that way? Or, I wish you hadn't done that. Can you explain to me why you did it? Like, that is not going to keep that person calm, right? So you want to, and I fully admit that I understand what I'm about to say can be hard with certain people. I have a heck of a time doing it with my mother. But you want to show respect for that person. Not that I can't respect my mother, meaning when someone says something to you and your internal judger instantly thinks, well, that was stupid or moronic or whatever the judger says, you want to try to instantly remember, no, this is a human being who has different experiences than me, who let me understand that before I jump to assuming what they're doing, right? So, for example, I know a lot of people, me included, who have had, employees in the office and, they're late with a project, and they're always late with the project. And my first reaction as the boss can occasionally be, they hand it in or they send it to my email and I say to them, why were you late again?
Yeah.
That is not helpful, right? That's not going to get communications. If I say to them, hey, this looks pretty good, I've got a couple of notes, but I noticed that it was late. Tell me what's going on. Is everything okay? Explain to me why it was late. Let me understand that. Maybe you've got too much on your plate. Maybe there's something personal going on, whatever the situation is, right? But I'm not gonna learn that, and I'm not gonna be able to work with that person if I just go instantly to the judger. So honor thyself, honor thy neighbor. The second thing is tell your story. Now, in part 2, honor thy neighbor. If you've done it right, if you've asked the question in a way where the person feels calm and comfortable and not like they're being judged and not like they're going to be, thrown out, which is literally the amygdala, the lizard brain, like worried that I'm going to get discarded to the tiger, that I'm going to be thrown out of the tribe. So if you've done your job right, that person has opened up to you, right? They've shared with you. To use the example of the employee who I said to, can you explain to me why this was late? I want to help understand that. Maybe I can help you manage your workflow. Let's just assume for a minute that employee said, I'm sorry, it actually doesn't have anything to do with my workload. My sister's really sick and I'm actually the primary caretaker right now. Oh, okay. Wow, I didn't know that. How can we help you? How can we, what can we do? So that person, chances are, has been vulnerable with you, or at very least has shared something. So step 3 is your opportunity to share something back, because the way to understanding, the way to when we're compassionate, it rules out condemnation. When we have understanding, it pushes out upset. It enables us to communicate better. And I want to tell you a quick story. I know I've been talking a lot here, but I want to just tell you one quick story that exemplifies the whole thing. And I'm very aware that I'm a New Yorker who's about to tell a story about the pandemic. and this situation, they didn't use the 3 steps particularly, but it so well exemplifies them at work. During the pandemic, there was a podcast, and that podcast host wanted to, I don't know if he was doing a social experiment or what, and you can find this online, but he basically wanted to understand why the people who were anti-vaxxers, right? He wanted to try to convince them to take the vaccine. I don't know why he thought that was the thing to do, but he did. So he got a group of anti-vaxxers on the podcast, and he invited a bunch of scientists and doctors and people who work in the field of infectious diseases. And they talked to these people about facts, and they talked about data and statistics and all this stuff. didn't convince them of anything. Because once a human being has dug in and made up their mind, statistics, data, facts, none of that matters. It doesn't. It's emotional. The next guest was Chris Christie, right? At the time, Christie was known, he's a former Republican governor of New Jersey, very well-respected conservative. Chris Christie comes on, and step one, honor thyself. He did not feel attacked by or defensive by their stance. He was calm, and he trusted himself. And what he said to them is, I'm vaccinated. And the reason I'm vaccinated is because I got COVID and I've never been sicker. My friend Hope Hicks got COVID. She's never been sicker. My aunt got COVID and died, and my uncle got COVID and died. He said, so this has really impacted my life and my family. So you don't have to get vaccinated. That is your right as Americans. Nobody can tell you to do that. But I am, because, that makes me feel better and safer. And so what happened then is that a couple of people, not everybody, but a couple of people started to say, you know what, that makes sense to me. And if he's vaccinated, maybe I will. Or if he's vaccinated, I don't have to do it, but I get it now. I understand why people would. Right. So it's at the emotional level where you're going to be able to affect, yes, change, but more importantly, just from the get-go, open people's minds up to a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think that often behind these the divergences or strong stance is a unserved emotion that's somehow grounded in fear. And I think that if you give fear light, then you can actually be freer to make a better decision for yourself, your family, and your community. And I think that's the goal, is to allow people a choice that can help. They are from an evolved personal positioning of how would be better for them or their family, and how do they move into that. I mean, I really liked, the idea of self, starting with yourself, because I've been involved in biofeedback and mindfulness and meditation practices and stress management for years. And if you go back to some of the episodes, there's a few of them that'll actually explain exactly how to do it. So, and I think what's interesting about this is that the time between something happening and your response is where your leadership ability comes in. So you have a conscious choice to determine how to react in that moment. Are you a beacon of light? Are you providing, or are you explaining why you might get emotional, right? It's like, this really bothers me. It's not about you, but I'm going to have some energy, right? Or are you going to be able to be the calm in the room that is able to kind of bring the energy level down and navigate through chaos? So I think it's that leadership choice in that gap, in the microsecond gap between the incident occurring and your response. And I really appreciated honoring the neighbor. And you talked about how really understanding them and taking the time to not just come from your point of view of why aren't the deadlines being met, but what is going on. And I've used this technique called the commitment-based management, which creates a conversation loop that allows people to come back and renegotiate a deadline, or allows you to say, well, the commitment, what was our commitment? And we've agreed this commitment. Now, if that needs to change because of events, then you have that capacity to have a conversation around that doesn't that honors the the commitment from both sides. Like it doesn't abdicate your responsibility. It helps you to operate at a higher level. So I think that's fantastic. And then sharing the stories so people feel like it's not just them, so, and they learn from stories. I mean, we're still, like you talk about the tribe. One of the great things about a tribe is how focused we are still on telling stories, and how we want to know problem, solution, and action. How we want to understand, what did you do when that happened? How can you share your wisdom with me? And I think earlier you spoke about the multi-generational aspect. I think that is a beautiful aspect of our current culture, is that we have so many active generations, and then the ability to learn from each of them, and that collective wisdom of the different generations has the ability to create highly resilient corporations. I mean, corporations that are very adaptive and strategic, and can execute in rapid time, or actually be able to navigate slow when it needs to be slow. So I don't know. I think that the 3 steps, if you really look at the elements of them, are grounded in truths that we've known for millennia. and in the age of AI, we're faced with a new unknown, but the fundamentals are still the same. It's still us. We're still people, and the people are what gets this world to move around. So let's honor that, and adapt that ancient wisdom to the modern days, and become conscious leaders. We need to break, and I think this is a good time to recap and to close out. We're going to come back after the break and talk about one of the key lessons that Joanna is going to leave with us to take on the next steps, and be able to up-level our communication as a leader. So I look forward to seeing you guys when we come back. This is Catherine Calarco on Humanity Evolved. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
All clear. Let me get that saved, and we're good to go in just a moment.
Thanks.
So how long is the 3rd segment?
Be very short.
Okay.
It just be we'll just take like 5 minutes to do the close. That's good. Or you want if it takes a little longer, that's great, but it'll be 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Great.
And then call to action. Thank you so much, Joanna. This is fantastic.
Oh, my pleasure. You've been great. I love the interaction. Do you do the call to action, or do I?
You can, if you want to. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll do it for both.
Okay.
All right. Ready for your counting? All right. Going in 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back. This is Catherine Calarco on Humanity Evolved with Dr. Joanna Massey, talking about mastering communication in the age of AI. Just before the break, we walked through the 3 steps, and I think it's really important to restate those 3 steps. Honor self, honor your neighbor, and share your own story. I think these are ancient wisdoms adapted for our modern environment in the age of AI. Joanna, to continue that conversation, is there anything that you recommend that you feel is a key synthesis of these 3 elements, and a story that demonstrates that?
Sure. I think I can't think of just one thing, because I've got a whole bunch of things in my mind right now, but number one takeaway, that one of the superpowers that every human being has is vulnerability. And in the United States, we were taught at a certain point that vulnerability is no good. And the truth is, it's actually, it is extremely helpful in communications to getting people to understand each other. When we get into that fight, and then all you're doing is when we criticize each other, then you just get criticism back that leads to more criticism. Right. So it just is this ongoing, and we see it on social media all the time. Right. So, this blaming, shaming thing, it doesn't work. Right. It's the understanding and the vulnerability that can really get things moving. And then the other thing I was going to say is, with the honor yourself, honor thyself, the paying attention to the amygdala hijack, which is what it's called when you get into fight, flight, or freeze. That can happen in a nanosecond. It is really, really hard to stop. I talk about this stuff, write about it, and teach it. I am not capable of stopping fight, flight, or freeze a lot of the time. It's a biological reaction. And I just want to tell you a quick story. I worked in Hollywood for a long time, as I said in the beginning. And 2 of the people I worked with, one was Chris Rock and one was Will Smith. And our audience might remember that there was an incident between Chris and Will at the Academy Awards a couple of years ago. And, Chris made a joke about Jada, Will's wife. Will got very upset, stormed the stage, slapped Chris Rock, went back to his seat, and started to yell out, stuff. And it was shocking. And I was shocked because I want everybody to know that is absolutely not Will Smith. That is
Yeah.
not the man I know. Will is gregarious and funny and kind. He's the one who diffuses situations with humor. Right? That was not him. And so I followed the situation afterward for like a year. And when Will kind of started to speak out again about what happened, he said that something had happened earlier in the day, having nothing to do with the Academy Awards, and it really stressed him out. You know what he was saying to us? He's saying that when he stepped foot on the red carpet, he was already primed for an amygdala hijack. The slightest provocation was going to set him off. And Rock gave him that provocation. And so he hit that space. So, and I want you to know something else about Will. He is really smart businessman. He's very attuned and he knows that his reputation is important, and he knows that he gets judged differently because he's a Black man. And so believe me when I tell you that I haven't talked to him because I haven't talked to him in like a decade. I worked with him a long time ago, but I am certain that loss of control, which I know is out of character for him, came from that biological fight, flight, or freeze moment.
Right.
So it can hit any of us. So you gotta also go easy on yourself, but please also go easy on the person that it's happening to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that awareness. And I think it's a very public example of how this unfolds and the unfortunate outcomes of it. And also, how do you manage it afterwards? Right. And we are all leaders, and some of us are in greater spotlight than others, and so how can we walk the way, but also manage when we trip up, and you have that oops moment, or the, oh man, that is not me, and I think that it's important to recognize both of those. And I think that it shouldn't be the disaster forever. You know what I mean? There's a walk back. But please don't let it get to be that bad, but it's like you have support around you, and you are stronger than you think and And I think in these days, we need all of us to have a greater understanding, so that we are, one, not triggered by things people might say on social media, don't overreact to it, and also find ways to give feedback and take feedback, because you talk about criticism. And I think that you also don't want people to come afraid to say you've got spinach on your teeth. You want people to have your back and be able to be really clear about that, and you want champions in your corner that are gonna, hey dude, did you know that, oh my gosh, maybe you should talk to that person, or something like that. You want those moments, where you can actually build strength and build capabilities and diversity in conversations. We all need it. The IDEO design principles based on views from different people at the table, and to create that excellent launch or product or whatever comes out of it. You don't want to create groupthink. You want the diversity of thought. I know, I just think it's amazing. And I really appreciate your time and energy with this. That is something to consider for, write it down, take a moment to be that person, to be the one who champions mastering communication in the age of AI. And, Joanna, how can people stay in touch with you? What would be the call to action, or how can we continue this conversation?
Thank you for asking that. I do a lot of thought leadership posts on LinkedIn, and I love to interact with people on LinkedIn. And so, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Joanna Dodd Massey. I'm pretty easy to find. I think that what I appreciate LinkedIn for, and I just posted something, a thought leadership piece this week, where I can take a controversial subject, which is DEI and politics that are combined right now in a story that came out, and talk about it in a measured way and get measured comments back.
So actually have a learning environment, or have a discourse of discussion, which is fantastic. Yeah. So, maybe practice that. Maybe that's something that we could all do this week, is practice an opportunity to have a diverse conversation with different people, and just open the door. I think it's needed now more than ever because we all want a better world. We all want a world that our families can grow up in and we can grow old in, you know, where we're supported and we have a community and we have hope and we create abundance and wealth and generosity, you know. So I just think, you know, that call to action is to engage with Dr. Massey, you know, get on LinkedIn, follow her posts, comment on the posts. And I would also add, read one of your books, you know, read one of the books.
Thank you.
Yeah. And please connect with me. I want to continue this conversation. You know, I'm Catherine Calarco on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me. I want to hear from you directly. You know, I want to connect. I want to continue this conversation. We as leaders are designing our future, and we are designing it by our actions and our thoughts. And the best way we can do that is to continue to grow and learn and include our group. And the group should be diverse. So let's make that happen for a better world. And as always, I'm optimistic and I'm all in to be that light and also to lead the way and walk towards rather than walk away. So this is Catherine Calarco and Dr. Joanna Massey talking about mastering communication in the age of AI. Know not to be daunted, that there are tips, tools, and techniques to enable us to master and design the future that we want to create, rather than abdicating what we fear. So take the moment, determine where you're going to start, and create one action step out of today's talk. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. This is Catherine Calarco with Dr. Joanna Massey on Humanity Evolved. Thank you for joining us today.
All clear. Great show.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
All right,
Hope
let
you
me
both have a
stop
great rest of your
recording.
day.
Thank you so